So, we know that exploitative management practices suppress wages, create poor working conditions, and overall hurt all workers alike. But why do the US-born workers feel the need to blame non-US-born workers? Greetings, this is Paul from Management as a Liberal Art, where we reclaim management to serve people and society. Today's topic is scapegoating and worker dignity. This video is part 3 of our 5-part series titled Immigrants Aren't the Problem, Employers Are. You see, when people experience economic decline, with stagnant wages, job instability, community decay, their anger is a rational response to a very real problem: uncertainty. This is not only financial uncertainty, but also a deep doubt about the system's rationality and who is truly in charge. Drucker called this kind of fear a social and psychological shock. When people can't predict their job security, they lose faith that the forces shaping their lives are logical or just. In his early analysis of industrial society, Drucker argued that psychological insecurity fuels fear of the unknown, and that fear drives a search for scapegoats and culprits. When insecurity manifests this way, it naturally leads to a search for someone to blame. And that's the key point. Scapegoating is a search for someone to blame. It's not a serious attempt at addressing the problem, but rather an emotional coping mechanism. People are attempting to release frustration, tension, and anger by directing it onto a single punishable target. This targets the frontline worker instead of the systemic issues, the design of the organization, the market forces, or the policies that define who succeeds. It goes after the person who has the least control over setting pay, structuring roles, enforcing standards, or defining the rules of the game. Immigrants are often unfairly targeted as scapegoats because they are visible, easily labeled as outsiders, and often lack social and political leverage. However, blaming immigrants for economic stagnation mistakes correlation for causation. While immigrants may be concentrated in low-wage work, the critical question remains: why are these jobs so systematically poor that they rely on worker vulnerability just to operate? Drucker observed that when people lack a clear role and status in society, that is, when they feel disconnected, societies often start seeing certain groups as vague threats. In this environment, minority groups can be blamed for a wider feeling of things falling apart. Basically, when established institutions can't explain why things are going wrong, society invents scapegoats. Here's one key MLA takeaway for today's discussion. Scapegoating is rampant when organizations drop the ball. When companies and public institutions fail to provide predictable rules and infrastructure, fair opportunities for advancement and growth based on performance, and dignified work that is focused on contribution to society, employees and workers lose faith in the system that they are entirely dependent on. This act of blaming others then steps in to fill that void. So, to cut down on scapegoating, the answer isn't just to tell people to play nice. That's not going to work. The answer we need is to restore the foundations that make blame shifting less necessary, to restore trust, responsibility, and accountability. That brings us to the deeper question: what is management's responsibility in this man-made ecosystem we call society? So Peter Drucker developed the concept of social ecology to analyze the man-made environment we live in. As a social ecologist, Drucker viewed society as an interconnected system where organizations, such as business and government, as well as the individual, rely on each other. The goal of social ecology is to keep this system balanced. That means respecting tradition and community while also promoting innovation and change. This balance is key to ensuring society stays stable and unified, even during challenging times. Importantly, social ecology is driven by values. It is a moral science. Drucker believed the sanctity of spiritual creation is fundamental, translating into core leadership principles, that of responsibility, authority based on expertise, and compassion. From this viewpoint, how we design our management systems has a huge impact on society. When leaders avoid responsibility, say by chasing short-term profits and/or ignoring human consequences of their decisions, it creates distrust in leadership. This directly leads to a fragmented society. Drucker emphasized that every organization exists as an organ of society and exists for the sake of society. If business leaders forget this and act as if their company is an end in itself, societal needs go unmet, and the public loses faith in our institutions. Take, for example, the 1980s corporate takeover boom. Drucker criticized raiders for prioritizing immediate shareholder profit above all else, often dismantling companies for a quick financial win. This approach sacrificed the company's long-term potential and negatively impacted employees. The result of this irresponsible management was a broader social instability. Communities were harmed, jobs vanished, and the public felt that leaders would betray stakeholders just to boost stock prices. As Drucker saw it, managers hadn't accepted that their power must be accountable to be legitimate. Avoiding that responsibility erodes social fabric. Essentially, Drucker viewed careless management as a key factor driving societal breakdown. When employers lay off workers en masse with little regard for community impact, or when they depress wages and then deflect blame onto immigrants, they are evading their social responsibility. This creates a breeding ground for resentment and scapegoating. A healthy social ecology, by contrast, requires that business and political leaders assume accountability for the well-being of the whole, actively working to integrate all people, including immigrants, into shared responsibility and contribution. Leaders must design our organizations and policies that bind individuals into productive roles, not leave people on the outskirts looking for someone to blame. As Drucker asserts, no organ can survive the body that it serves, and the enterprise is an organ of society. If corporate managers persistently dodge social responsibility, they weaken the very society on which their enterprise depends on. Eventually, both society and businesses suffer. One major consequence of responsibility-avoidant management is the demoralization of workers. Drucker frequently reminded us that people are an organization's only true resource, and that work is more than just a paycheck. It is how individuals attain status, community, and personal fulfillment. As he put it, these institutions in today's societies are increasingly the means through which individual human beings find their livelihood, find their access to social status, to community, and to individual achievement and satisfaction. Therefore, to make the worker achieving is a measurement of the performance of an institution. In other words, an organization that degrades or demoralizes its workers is failing one of its core purposes. It robs individuals of dignity by denying them the chance to contribute and grow. But how do workers preserve dignity and leverage in such conditions? From Drucker's perspective, it means insisting on being treated as responsible adults with something to contribute rather than cogs in a machine. He criticized that common industrial-era mindset defining rank-and-file employees as people who do as they are directed without responsibility or share in the decisions concerning of their own work. This view treats workers as mere inputs, which Drucker calls a serious misunderstanding. It ignores the fact that only the direct, focused, united effort of free human beings can produce a real whole, and that humans, unlike other resources, can develop and improve over time. Drucker argued that even frontline jobs are potentially managerial. Workers will be more productive if their jobs are designed to include autonomy, judgment, and responsibility for results. In practical terms, preserving dignity means giving workers a voice in how the work is done, opportunities to use their skills and judgment, as well as recognition as key stakeholders in the enterprise's success. Workers maintain their leverage, their agency, and voice by becoming knowledgeable contributors who management cannot afford to ignore. This might involve workers shifting their focus towards delivering results, performance, and refusing to check their brains at the door. Such respect unlocks motivation and performance. When institutions adopt a model that alienates their employees, such as having monotonous jobs, no inputs into decisions, a constant fear of layoffs, the result is a workforce that is present in body but absent in spirit, a phenomenon we today call quiet quitting. Drucker would view this widespread cynicism among workers as a damning indictment of management. In his words, if work and worker are grossly mismanaged, there will be no economic performance in any meaningful sense. He warned that gains achieved by disregarding workers' humanity are illusory and actually destructive. They will, by creating class hatred and class warfare, make it impossible in the end for the enterprise to operate at all, eroding the social foundation to which it stands. Therefore, from an MLA perspective, quiet quitting and cynical disengagement are signals that management has failed to provide purpose and fairness. The antidote is not to chastise workers for lack of hustle, but for leaders to re-earn trust, to rebuild an environment where workers want to engage. Drucker wrote that every enterprise requires commitment to common goals and shared values. Without such commitment, there is no enterprise. There is only a mob. It is management's job to foster that commitment by treating employees with dignity and giving them reason to believe in the mission. How then should leaders respond to these challenges? Drucker offers an answer through management as a liberal art, or what we are calling MLA.
Hello, Future Paul here. I'd like to first thank you so much for your time and attention. We've covered quite a few different concepts today in a rather short amount of time, so I think it's appropriate to take a quick commercial break. In the next video, we will return to talk about management as a liberal art in greater detail, what that means, what it represents, and how it benefits society as a whole. But what do you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. It always generates a lively discussion. As always, thank you so much for your time and attention. I will see you in the next video.